I am going to make you regret this!
Linda, please, just calm down.
Stop it, both of you!
I was halfway through a slow, lazy lap in my backyard pool when I heard her voice carry over the fence loud, a little too bright, like she was auditioning for a neighborly commercial. "Sam, your pool looks lovely," she called, and I should have smiled, should have waved. But something about the way she said it landed like a pebble in my chest. That's how it started, small and almost silly: a dog, a bar of soap, a friendship that curdled into a neighborhood war. By the end of that summer, my name was on an HOA notice, the sheriff's car was in my driveway, and I learned the hard way that fences don't just mark property lines, they mark the limit of how much civility you can afford. My name's Sam Turner. I live on a quiet street in Hollow Ridge, a cul-de-sac of tidy lawns and polite waves. I'd always loved my house for the little things: the creaky porch light, the maple tree that turned the yard into a gold confetti factory in October, and that stupid, perfect kidney-shaped pool I'd put in after my divorce because I needed something that felt like mine. I kept it simple: a gate with a lock, a small solar cover, a couple of lounge chairs. It was my refuge, the place I read, napped, and where my dog, Milo, pretended he was a seal. Life was steady, until Linda moved in next door with a casserole dish and a smile that never quite reached her eyes. At first, Linda was everything you want a neighbor to be, bringing over banana bread, introducing herself on a Sunday. We'd chat about plants and the city council, the usual small talk. Then her golden lab, Baxter, discovered the pool. He jumped the fence twice, once muddy, once panting under the noon sun, and Linda laughed it off. "He loves water," she said. "He's like a child." The first time I asked her not to let Baxter in, she looked offended, like I was asking for her to stop breathing. The second time she apologized, but 3 days later I found shampoo suds floating across my pool like someone had spilled a latte in slow motion. That was the night I locked the gate and left a polite note: "Please keep your dog out." She slid a handwritten note back under my door that said, "I'll call the HOA if you don't let Baxter cool off." I remember laughing then, the kind of little, nervous laugh you make when someone threatens you with something that sounds more like a nuisance than an ultimatum. The HOA notice didn't sound much better on paper. It came in a beige envelope the size of a postcard, an official-looking header, and a sentence that felt like a cold finger tracing my spine. "Pending investigation, cease unauthorized use of community resources." Community resources? My pool. I called the number, and a woman with a calm voice told me the board had received a complaint. That was the moment things began turning from neighborly tiff to institutional pressure. The board chair, a man named Harold Pike, was polite in a way that always makes me uneasy. "We just want to keep everyone safe," he said, though he never explained how a private backyard pool in a fenced yard was suddenly a public safety issue. I could have walked away. I almost did. The easiest path was to drain the pool, to hand Linda a victory and reclaim my peace. But the thing about boundaries is, once you give them up because it's easier, they collapse for good, not just on the outside, but inside you too. So I did what a mildly stubborn, semi-grown man does when he decides he's not being pushed around. I started documenting. I took pictures of the fence. I saved every note, every envelope. I asked for the HOA's complaint in writing. I emailed Harold and copied the board. I invited my friend Priya. She worked in compliance at a law firm and liked puzzles, over to help me read the fine print in the bylaws that suddenly seemed to read like a foreign language designed to confuse and intimidate. That's when the story stopped being about a broken fence and became about procedure. In the HOA's record folder, the very thing Harold had kept so tightly closed, there were emails between Linda and a couple of board members that read less like neighborly concern and more like performance. "We need to show strength," one said. "It will set an example." No vote had been held. No formal meeting minutes were recorded, but actions followed as if a verdict had been announced. Fines were threatened. A request came for a hearing, a small, formal affair where neighbors could air grievances and where a panel of 3 could decide whether my backyard leisure qualified as community misconduct. The hearing felt cinematic, if you can imagine a suburban version of courtroom drama. I stood in my swim trunks because I wanted to make a point. This was my life, my pool, my metaphor, and Linda, with an expression of practiced righteousness, sat with a neighbor named Carlton who never missed a board meeting. The tension in the room was a raw, low hum. People who'd glanced at me on the street were suddenly witnesses with opinions. I remember the way Harold adjusted his glasses as if to focus a camera, the way Linda's jaw worked when she spoke. "It's about rules," she said, "and safety." I put my thumb on the plat map, pointed out my property line, and I didn't raise my voice. I let Priya hand over the emails, the proof that behind the rule book there'd been a conversation about optics and power. What broke the room was small and stupid and perfect: an old ledger showing budget line items, and a receipt for a community landscaping improvement that had nothing to do with anything Harold claimed was in the neighborhood's interest. It was money moved without transparency. The ledger was the smell of ozone after lightning. Suddenly, the issue wasn't Sam's pool anymore, it was who gets to decide for the neighborhood and how they spend the dues. Faces shifted. People murmured. A woman named Rosa, who'd been quiet all evening, stood and said what everyone had been thinking. "We elect a board to serve us, not to perform for neighbors." Harold cleared his throat, and for a moment I thought he might deflect, but the weight of the papers and the voices and the smallness of the lie that a private pool was a public hazard pressed on him. He dug in his briefcase and found a letter of resignation. He didn't say much. He didn't have to. The aftermath was messy in the best kind of way. The board rescinded the complaint. They apologized in an awkward, written fashion that felt more like legal cleanup than contrition. Linda's smile went brittle. She'd been reprimanded by the new temporary chair, and the neighborhood's consensus landed like a slow, communal exhale in my direction. But the victory had claws. Linda, furious and cornered, retaliated the only way left. She drove by late one night and dumped a bucket of dish soap into my pool. It was petty, it was juvenile, and it was, in a way, perfect theater. I caught it on a cheap camera I'd set up after the hearing, a tiny piece of evidence that turned a neighbor's spite into a charge the police could understand. They treated it like vandalism. Linda was fined, and the conversation on our block changed. People stopped pretending they didn't know what was happening behind polite nicknames and potluck dinners. Through all that, what changed inside me was quieter than resignations and fines. I learned the shape of my own spine. I learned how being kind can be mistaken for weakness, and how quick we are to hand our peace over to avoid conflict, only to find the cost was our dignity. I also learned about community, not the tidy Instagram version, but the real thing where neighbors speak up, where testimony matters, and where a woman named Rosa and a man named Carlton, who I'd never thought of as particularly brave, sat in a room and decided not to let an undeserved authority stand. There's an odd, lingering thing about victories that are public. They leave a taste of iron, a reminder that systems are only as fair as the people who enforce them. The pool is back to its usual peaceful self now. Milo chases a ball across the lawn like he owns the world. Linda moved a few months later, nowhere dramatic, just a for sale sign one morning and a moving truck a week later. We waved as it left. She didn't look my way. The HOA restructured a little, tightened up their record keeping, and for better or worse, I've become the guy who keeps his documents in a labeled folder. If there's a takeaway, it's this: boundaries are not mean, they are essential. Paperwork matters. Witnesses matter. And sometimes, the thing we think of as neighborly kindness becomes a lever for someone else's power, and you have to choose whether to hand over your life or to stand and document, and stand and insist on decency. I'm not saying I was heroic, I'm saying I was stubborn, and stubbornness is underrated. So tell me, what would you have done? Was I right to fight, or should I have let it go for the peace of my evenings? Who decides what's community, and who gets to enforce it? Drop your thoughts below, and if you've ever had a neighbor cross a line or a board overstep, I want to hear it. Share the story, argue with me, and if you're feeling generous, hit like so other folks can weigh in. This kind of small-town power play isn't unique, and the best fix is conversation: messy, public, and honest.